Hello. Happy Saturday Night Live on Labor of Love on the Truth Teller Tales channel. How are you?
I'm good. It's almost March 28th, so we are almost looking at a April. I can't believe it.
It's nuts, crazy, and people thought, things were going to be happening leading up to Christmas, and now people are Easter and July 4th. I mean, I don't know, but at least it's great weather and things are fascinating and interesting things and that are happening that are intriguing and it's just to me it's just all the things kind of happening in the world that we see are just so fascinating and interesting because you just don't know how it fits into the puzzle.
Such a puzzle. It really seems like it's building up. And I just with the some of the Patriot podcasters, their shows this week, uh, they're sure connecting a lot of really interesting dots to the drops. It's I'm trying
Yes,
to like I'm excited, but then it's like, oh, we've been here before, so we know what the rug pull feels like. So
right.
it's just that it's kind of that. Is this it?
i
Is this it? Is this? But it
I know.
just
It's
seems like it's really
true.
all lighting up, and there's a lot of like guy on the couch just and Dave just really uh, as well as Joe, really have been doing some good digs in Abs and Stormy. So that's what I said. This
Yeah,
community and their
I know.
minds, it
Right.
is amazing how they see the patterns and what they can connect. It's just mind blowing to me. I'm just so thankful that I can be a part of it to at least watch and observe and yeah.
Me too. And seeing their confidence and their just calmness and confidence is just very cool, to be able to see. Um, well, tonight, it's a really, really, really important topic, and I'm just very excited to have on Michelle Peterson because um, she just has such an incredible story to tell. Um, I want to talk briefly about her, then I want to show a video.
Yeah.
Michelle, she was a mom, right? But then she switched very quickly to a national advocate. um, and it all started on the day that her 15-year-old son, she found out, had been unlawfully being groomed by his 34-year-old teacher and baseball coach. Um, and Michelle and her son went through 3 years. It was a grueling battle. Um, Finally, legally, they got a conviction. Um, but then now she has changed her life completely. And she's working across the country to try to fix laws, close loopholes, end plea deals and for predators and enforce lifelong sex offender registration. That's it. So what she's been doing tirelessly, she's helping to change laws and she's helping to empower parents and grandparents and it's an incredible journey and a story, and I can't wait to talk to her. But first, I want to share this story that was done, so people kind of have an understanding of what happened.
Investigates. Imagine discovering that your teenager has been receiving thousands of text messages from a teacher, many sexually explicit, dozens in the middle of the night. You might believe your child would tell you if this happened, but as NBC5's Phil Rogers discovered, that's not always the case.
The story unfolded here in Morris, southwest of Chicago, as middle America as it comes.
He wanted to make a sex video, put it straight out there.
Andrew Kozik says he had begun texting Stefan Belegno, a teacher here at Morris High School, because he was having trouble on the baseball team. But before long, he says Belegno was offering him money for oral sex.
It started off at $500 and then $1,000 and then $1,500.
But Andrew never told anyone, and no one knew until his mother heard him talking to Belegno on the phone.
He has no business calling you at 11 o'clock at night. That's completely inappropriate.
When she learned the two had been communicating by text message, Andrew's mother went to her computer and logged into the family's account. She found thousands of messages.
I was just sick because I knew in my heart, I'm like, this isn't just regular text messaging.
The family went to police, who searched Andrew's phone and found nearly 6,000 messages between the two. But only about a tenth of those could be recovered. And indeed, they are troubling. We can't read some of the more graphic messages, but among the more benign, the teacher writes, "When does the kissing begin? Icky," the student says. "How about if we just go at it and not video it?" the teacher declares. And on another occasion, "When you're 18, we can give each other everything."
Sometimes males to bond with males are crude.
Raymond Wigel is Belegno's lawyer. He insists the teacher was only trying to help Andrew through a bullying incident on the baseball team.
You say that these text messages do not indicate criminal activity. They certainly indicate stupidity for a teacher to be sending these messages.
Absolutely.
Wigel says he and his client concede bad judgment, but they point to the thousands of other texts no one read, as well as huge gaps in the transcripts.
There's a stupid intent, but there was not an evil intent to have sex with this young man.
I don't care what context you put it in. When you offer somebody money for sex, that's solicitation.
So why didn't Andrew tell someone? Records show at one point he even told a DCFS investigator the teacher's messages had not crossed the line.
Why'd you tell him?
I didn't want to lose his job. I didn't want him to get in trouble.
Belegno was found guilty of indecent solicitation of a minor and unlawful grooming. He is to be sentenced next month.
I want him to have to register as a sex offender. The jail time would just be icing on the cake.
Michelle Peterson says she and her son wanted to talk to us to stress the importance of reporting incidents like this. 18 of these texts were after midnight, 15 after 3 a.m. The Grundy County State's attorney says he believes it's a cautionary tale about giving children digital technology this Christmas without firm guidelines on how it will be used.
So I wanted to share that with you. And Michelle is here, and I'm super grateful that she is here to tell her story. Michelle Peterson, thank you for being here.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Oh, absolutely. This is, I have so much I want to ask you. We had a lovely conversation a few weeks ago, and your life has taken such a path that I'm sure you never saw coming.
No,
years ago.
never. No. If you would have told me even 3 years ago that I'd be doing this, I would have told you were crazy. So,
Yeah. So take me back, because when you told me this story, and I have a son when he was 15, I had a baseball coach, all this, it just, everything goes through your head. So you're just, at that time, it was 2010, correct?
Correct. Yep.
So it was just a regular day, and things just didn't add up for you. You got suspicious. What happened there?
Right. So back in 2010, it was on a Sunday in November, and my husband and I came back from a funeral out of state, and it was late. So I went in to tell my son goodnight. It was about 10:30 at night, and he was sleeping. So I just closed the door, went about my business to get ready for work for the next day. And as I'm walking in the hallway past his room, I hear him pretty loudly upset. How often do you want me to call you? You know that I'm busy. I'm taking a class at college. I'm working 2 jobs. And thought that he had a new girlfriend. And then I hear him say, I'll meet you in your classroom tomorrow to pick up those paintballs. I was like, what? So I knocked on the door and I said, who are you talking to? And he told me. I said, you need to hang up the phone. And I said, why is he calling at 11 o'clock at night? That's completely inappropriate. And went straight to the computer downstairs, just like the video said, and looked up that phone number that he was speaking to and went to the text messages. And there were thousands of messages between the two. And you could even see 10, 15, 20 messages coming in at a time from the teacher without my son responding back. And then hours later, my son would finally respond back. And he just said that, he was trying to get him just to stop texting him, and then felt that he needed to respond back because he was a teacher and he was a coach in a position of authority. And so that's why he felt like he needed to respond back. But what I did at that point was printed off about 3 weeks worth of messages, which came out to be about 1/4 of an inch thick, and took it to the principal the next morning and handed it to him. And this was just the phone numbers back and forth. There's no verbiage. So it's just the cell phone bill. And I said, I think we have a problem. and told him what was going on. And he sat back in his chair and let out this big sigh. And he said, I just gave him a teacher's award 2 weeks ago. So even he at the time realized that this was probably not good, right? And when you see the times of these messages coming in, you know that this is something that's not good. And so he said, I'll meet with both the teacher and Andrew today, and I will get back to you and let you know how that went. So I went back and met with him later in the day, and he said that they were both denying any wrongdoing. And I truly think at this point, my 16-year-old son just thought that it would all stop and he was done with this guy, right? And so I asked the principal, I said, so as a mandatory reporter, are you going to report anything to the Department of Children and Family Services, or DCFS here in Illinois? And he said, well, I have really nothing to go on. They're both denying any wrongdoing. He goes, but you're Andrew's mom. You can file a report anytime you want. So he must have told me 4 different ways in that conversation that I should file a DCFS report. And he said if they need some place to meet, they can meet here at the high school. We can open up a conference room for them. And so I said, okay. I left there, went to a local church and talked to the pastor there, who was not my pastor at the time. And I was pretty upset. I mean, this is somebody's livelihood. It's their life, right? So you want to make sure that what you're thinking and feeling is actually what's happening. And he said, no, this is kind of out of your hands. You should actually report this to DCFS, let them do their investigation. So I still waited another week before I did anything, and then contacted DCFS. And they were supposed to be out within 24 hours. Nothing happened 24 hours later. And about 6 days later, I called the local office, and they said, well, the person who has your file is on vacation. This was on a Wednesday. I'll never forget. And she said, she'll be back on Monday. I said, so if this was something that was emergent, I'm like, it just sits on somebody's desk? Like, how does that even work? And so I, me being me, I contacted the director of DCFS for Illinois, made a phone call, and she actually picked up the phone and told her what was going on. I could hear her typing in the background. She said, you reported this 6 days ago. They should have been out within 24 hours. I said, I'm fully aware. That's why I'm calling you, and told her what the office told me. And she said, if someone is not there today, I want you to give me a call back, but someone will be there today. So this is about 2 or 2:30 in the afternoon. So getting close to the end of the school day. And the local office called back about 10 minutes later, and they said, we can't get somebody there today. It's too late in the day, but we can get somebody there tomorrow at 8 a.m., which that's fine for me. I mean, I was at work. I'm a physical therapist. I had patients scheduled, so I had to offload my schedule, and also wanted to give my son a heads up that they were coming. And so I called the director back, left a message this time, and let her know what was happening and that was fine with me, 8 o'clock the next morning. And I get a phone call about 15 minutes later from the school letting me know that DCFS was on their way. So she must have called them and said, you will get someone there today. And by the time I got to the school, they already had my son in a room talking to him with the investigator, also with one of the counselors at the school. So I didn't even get a chance to talk to him, nor did they wait for me to get there before they started speaking to him. And he was only 16. So I was really not happy that they started talking to him without me being there. He walks out of the room as I'm walking in, and if looks could kill, I wouldn't be sitting here right now, because he was very upset with me. He wanted this to just go away. He didn't want to do this. And he looked at me, he's like, you're unbelievable. And so I walked in, and the investigator said, I don't know why this was so imperative for us to get here today. This just seems like, benign text messaging. So I handed her the 3 weeks worth of the papers that I had. And I said, this is just 3 weeks worth. This has been going on since May. I said, you might want to note the times that some of those text messages were coming in. And she looked at me and she goes, oh. I said, you know what? How dare you make me feel bad for calling you? I said, this was a very tough conversation to have and a tough call to make. And I said, this might not be the worst thing that you've ever gone through, but this is the worst thing my family is going through at this point. And told her to never make another family feel bad for calling them ever again. Left there. And I didn't say it that calmly at all. I was very upset, and left there, went home, and my son was really upset with me. And at this point, we really had no verbiage. We had nothing. So I was that mom. My kid had a phone since he was probably 11, and I would check his phone all the time because I was a single parent for a while. So I would check his phone intermittently throughout the week, and he never knew when. So every time a message would come in from this guy, he would delete it because he knew I was checking his phone. So I never saw one of over 6,000 messages. for that very
Wow.
reason. Yeah. And so I started off trying to find somebody who could pull those messages off the phone, because your phone is a mini computer. So the messages have to be in there. And
Yeah.
I found a local detective in Joliet, Illinois, which is about 20 minutes from where I live. I'm about 80 miles southwest of Chicago here in Illinois, in a small farming community. And this detective said that that's what he does. He pulls deleted messages off electronics. So I got a hold of our detective, and he said, I totally forgot about this guy. He did an in-service for us last year. And he said, I'll have to get the phone from you for chain of custody to take it to him. So I let my son have his phone throughout the weekend. On Sunday night, late at night, I said, hey, I need your phone. I found somebody to pull those messages off the phone. And he just put his head down, his face kind of went green. I said, is there something you need to tell me? And he wouldn't even look at me. He's like, I can't tell you. He said, I'll talk to the detective and to the principal tomorrow. So it was at that point that we had a conversation about suicide. So I told him, I said, nothing is ever worth taking your life over. Whatever happened, whatever's in these messages, I will always love you. I will love you through this, and I believe what you're going to tell them. And just know that if you ever did anything to hurt yourself, it would crush me. And so he went to bed that night, and I kept vigil over his room. And
You did.
And so he gets up the next morning, and we went down there. He was in the office with them for about 3 hours, and told the principal and the detective everything, where he wanted to make a video, had offered him money. And then he had also referred to his body part as my little guy. Am I ever going to get to see the little guy? This sort of thing. And so the principal came out, and he said, you were spot on with what you were thinking. And he said, we'll be opening up our own DCFS investigation at this point. And he said, Andrew wants to talk to you and tell you himself what was in these messages. And we gave him some tactics on how to do that. He said, but I will be here all day if you want to come back and talk to me later. So we went home, and Andrew told me about the video. He told me about how he referred to his body part as my little guy. And he never said anything about the money or the solicitation. So I went back to the school, and he said, what did he tell you? And I told him. He goes, he didn't even tell you the worst part. And he said, the worst part is that he wanted to that he offered him money for sex, and up to $1,500. And I said, okay. And it was at that point that I wasn't really sure how I was going to handle all of this. And our detective actually subpoenaed for the teacher's cell phone, which got denied by our state's attorney. And all of this hinged on text messages and electronic notification. And so he asked for the cell phone and for his computer, and that got denied. So nothing at this point is actually happening. He's not charged with anything, except that the school put him on paid administrative leave because of the union contracts, right? He's got to be on paid leave until he's actually proven guilty. So he sat on paid administrative leave for a while. The detective had my son's cell phone for about 2 or 3 months, couldn't get the messages off the phone because Apple had just done an upgrade, and he was having difficulty with that upgrade, getting the messages off the phone. And so and the phone companies, just so you know, don't have to help them, even with a subpoena. So they weren't very helpful in getting the messages off the phone and getting them to the detective. So they then took the phone down to the Illinois State Police, and they had his phone then for about another 3 months or so. So now we're looking at about almost a full year after I overheard that first conversation, and nothing has happened. And I then met with one of my friends' husbands, who was a Secret Service agent at the time. And for those of you who don't know, the Secret Service will actually help local jurisdictions with cases when they're not serving protecting the president. So there was a friend of his that was on a pedophile task force. And so he met with me, and he said, Michelle, this is just too much work for one person, and they just want you to go away, the state's attorney's office. And so he said, I'm going to give you 2 business cards. Keep one for yourself and give one to the state's attorney, and tell them if they don't have the messages off that phone in the next 7 days, you're going to turn them over to the feds. He's like, I'll have them off there in 15 minutes. So that's what I did. And lo and behold, we had the messages back 3 days later, which leads me to believe that they were sitting on these messages that whole time. So I end up going in and meeting with 2 assistant state's attorneys with my husband, who is my son's stepfather. And we were in a huge conference room at the courthouse, and we live in the county seat. So we're in the same town where this school is. in where the courthouse is. So we go in and meet with them, and they're on one side of the conference table and we're on the other, and there's a stack of papers sitting in front of them. And the older gentleman said, I just don't think we have enough to go on. There's just too many gaps in the transcripts. So I said, are those the transcripts sitting in front of you? And they said, yes. I said, can I look at them? And they both looked at each other like they weren't expecting that. And at this point, I had been pretty much following their lead with everything. I've been pretty compliant, pretty docile, I guess, right? And just kind of following the way that they do things. So I said, here's the deal. I said, that's my property, and so is the phone. So if you don't let me, if you're not going to do anything with those, I'm leaving here today with that information and with my cell phone. And so they let me read the messages. And as I'm reading through them, tears are just dripping from my face, because not only was the information there about the money, but wanting to make the video, referring to his body part as my little guy, and then so much more. Even though there were gaps in the transcripts, all of that was still there. And so I pushed them back very slowly, and I got extremely angry and yelled like I've never yelled before. And I said, you have got to be kidding me. I said, everything's in there that you need. And they looked at me like, ma'am, you need to calm down. I said, no, I don't. I said, you guys need to do your job. And the older gentleman then said, if there was just another kid. I said, oh, because one's not enough. I said, what does he have to do, sodomize my son before you do anything? My husband started kicking me under the table, and I said, you kick me one more time, I'm going to kick you out that door. And that's how I came up with this logo here. So it says I was a mama bear before it was cool. And it's a grizzly, right? So that's how you become when you're protecting your children. And at this point, they didn't really know what to do with me. So I left there and I said, I want to meet with the state's attorney. Of course, he was busy, couldn't meet with me. And at this point, I hadn't met with the actual state's attorney. So I called back the next morning at 8:01 the next morning and said I wanted to meet with him. They said he was busy. I said, that's fine. I'll be coming in to pick everything up today. I'm going to take it to the actual Illinois state's attorney's office. Because at the same time in Illinois, the whole Dennis Hastert thing was going on. So Dennis Hastert was the Speaker of the House. He had also been a wrestling coach here in Illinois, and he had been charged and subsequently convicted of abusing children on the wrestling team. So that was going on at the same time in the background. So Lisa Madigan was working on some of that stuff. And then I got a phone call back about 15 minutes later from the actual state's attorney and said he could meet with me that afternoon. So I'd printed off an article where he said he came back to Grundy County to protect the children and families of Grundy County. Took that with me, and I explained to him what was going on with our case. He said he wasn't aware of what was going on with our case. I said, I have heard that about you, that you really don't know what's going on in the county. I said, you went to this high school. We're in the county seat. How do you not know about this? And I set the article down. I said, how about we start doing this? You start protecting the families and the children of this county. And that started off our tumultuous relationship. And so I left there that day, and our detective called me the next day, asked what I said to him. And I told him, he said, we just got 3 or 4 subpoenas that they've been waiting for months. And because I brought all of that up too, that they were waiting on subpoenas for other child abuse cases that he was afraid to actually do anything about. So again, nothing is happening. Months go by. I get a phone call from the principal, and he said, listen, I need to meet with you. So I go down and meet with him, and he said, I've been trying to get the state's attorney to subpoena the personnel file of this teacher. And I said, okay. So I go down there, and he said, listen, there's so much information here that they're going to want to see. So I go back down to the state's attorney's office. Now, mind you, I'd been in there probably every week since all of this had started. I go back down there, and at this point, he has me waiting outside. I waited until after closing time and just sat there, and I wasn't going anywhere until he met with me. I probably sat there for 2 hours, and he finally met with me, and I had told him I wanted him to subpoena the personnel file. He said, what could possibly be in there that we would need? I said, what skin is it off of your back just to get it? And so he did. And the school then wouldn't release it to him until I came to sign off on it. And they said, because of the HIPAA law, my son's name was all over this file. So I go down there to sign off on this. And this principal had been a counselor before. So he had had a meeting with the teacher, the union rep, and the superintendent of schools. And he asked him flat out, did you ever offer Andrew money for oral sex? Did you want to make a sex video? Did you refer to his body part as my little guy? And he said he put his head down, shook his head in affirmation, and said yes. I'm like, we got him, right? So I go down to the state's attorney's office, tell him what was in there, and he was mad. He said, why'd they let you see it? I said, because of the HIPAA law, my son's a minor. He goes, they didn't have to do that. I said, honestly, I think they let me see it because I was having so much trouble down here with you. And if they didn't let me see it there, I'd never know what was in there. So now that I do, if he's not arrested in the next 7 days, I'm going to have every major news station on your front lawn. And this is an election year. So he waited the full 7 days before he indicted him.
Oh,
And yep. And then we went status hearing after status hearing. This went on forever. And then in 2012, we voted in a new state's attorney. His name's Jason Helland, and he came into office in January of 2013. And at that point, the detective went to him and said, hey, there's a case that's been sitting out there for 2.5 years. You need to really work this case first. So he did, met with us. He said, I think we're gonna have to take a plea deal. It's been too long. There's too many gaps in the transcripts. They're gonna say that you can't remember everything. Now, at this point, my son is 18, just finished his freshman year of college. And I was livid. I'm like, so we have to take a plea deal. This guy's gonna still be able to teach. It's gonna be a slap on the hand. He'd have to pay a fine. That's about it. No sex offender registration, nothing. So by the grace of God, because God's hand has been all over this from the very beginning, we go to court in August of 2013, and this guy decides he wants to take it to trial. He's not going to take the plea deal. Everybody looked at each other like, what? The state's attorney couldn't believe it. He's like, that never happens. I said, yeah, well, God wants his children saved. So apparently once you hear this whole story, there's a whole reason God has had a plan for this entire thing. So in July of 2013, grooming became a law here in Illinois. And this isn't just normal grooming. So you have regular grooming where you groom someone to be a CEO of a company. You groom your children to be of good moral character. This is unlawful grooming, whereby somebody is trying to gain the trust of another person, usually somebody in a position of authority, going after a child, and typically it's to have sex with that child. So he said everything that's in this law is everything he did to you, your family, and this community. Now, when he started texting my son in May of 2010, I am also a physical therapist. As I said, I was in his house treating a family member for home health physical therapy. I was also coaching at the same high school where he was coaching baseball. I was coaching softball. And so he knew me as a parent, as a colleague, and then also as a healthcare provider. I think he never thought for 1 second that I would ever go after him for anything. And I always maintained that he had the right kid. He had the wrong family. My son is very kind-hearted, will do anything for anybody. Just at 16, didn't know the boundaries, right? Didn't know how to say no and cut that off and come to me.
right.
And even at 31, he said he would have never come to me had I not overheard that conversation.
Wow.
So, yep. So we go to court in October of 2013. The defense put me down as a witness to keep me out of the courtroom. And I asked the state's attorney why the judge was allowing that to happen. And he said that he wanted to give them no recourse for appeal. So he was giving them everything they wanted. Now, mind you, always trying to find the glass, half full. I said to our state's attorney, I said, can you please tell the defense attorney thank you? Because I just got to spend all of these hours with my son in a room with no phone, no TV. We played cards, we played board games, and I got to talk to him at 19 years old about things that we would never talked about for probably 5 or 6 hours because we're not allowed in the courtroom. So he testified for about 4 hours, and we got a conviction of solicitation of a minor in the very first unlawful grooming conviction in the United States. But not only the very first, he then went back to appeal, got the solicitation charge removed. So even currently, we have the only standalone grooming conviction in the United States.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah.
Michelle, I have so many questions. First of all, wow, you are the epitome of a warrior. And you're being on a show, Labor of Love. I mean, that's the epitome of labor of love. And you are fierce and exactly what we need. What we always need, but people like you are coming through at this period in our time in our history, and you just take our breaths away. And I could see Tricia, who is the co-host that you haven't really even met yet. She wears her heart on her sleeve, so I could see her getting even emotional with it. Um, I just have to personally go back on a couple moments and ask you, you your emotion had to have spiked over so many times over years, because first you got the first spike, Michelle, the night it happened, and then you got the list of the texts, but you don't see what's in the text, so you get another spike, and then you get a spike when you're sitting there and reading actually what was said, well, what your son said, and then what was said. How did you manage yourself during this time? You went through such a whirlwind and a roller coaster with your emotions. How did you cope in those years?
Well, I mean, it was a lot of with my family and my friends, leaned hard on them actually. I didn't have a relationship with God like I do now. And I did do a lot of praying at the time, but it's not like it would have been currently. So,
Mhm.
but again, the very first place that I went, even before I called my parents, before I called my husband, before I called my son's father, I went straight to the church. And so I think that's really what helped ground me. Plus, I feel like God has been preparing me for this my entire life. Like your guest that I listened to yesterday, I played softball. I played sports my entire life. I don't like to lose. I am very tenacious. I am scrappy. I will find any way to get to the end game and win. So I think that has really, like I said, God prepared me. I played college softball. I will always try to dig in and do what I need to do to get the job done, no matter what it is, whether it's work, whether it's this, whether it's getting a grooming law passed in a state where it doesn't matter. I mean, even my family will tell you they don't like to play board games with me. So I think that's really kind of what got me through, is just God preparing me for such a time as this, right?
Michelle, was there, um, how did the community respond to you? Like, did you have parents when you started talking about this and pressing, that were like, oh, he would never do that? And did you have that kind of adversarial response, or did you have people that supported you? Did you have people that surprised you?
She there?
Can you
Yeah,
hear me?
there she is. I can hear her
Yes.
now.
I can't hear you. Hold on. My AirPods are acting up. So
Yeah, no problem. Um, yeah, and while she's doing that, um, there's so many levels to this, to what you're saying too,
so it's
Tricia,
always
and
fun when you have technical difficulties because I can't hear you, but you can hear me.
yeah, and maybe you can come out and come back in. I can text you that. Um, but and dealing with the state attorney also, um, there's a whole other story there that she told me. Come out and come back in. um, but what she found out too was levels of the corruption, of why people in were sitting on the information, and and what they were trying to hide, and what they were trying to cover up, and what they were trying to slow down. um it's, and that's just, and what always amazes me is that even on the local level that she's dealing with in Illinois, I wanted to see her, look at your text, look at the text. um is that there's corruption down to the very
The local level,
local.
right. Yeah, which is
And
what we've been hearing, constantly, is get involved at the local level.
look at your text, look at the text, come out and come back in. um and so, and maybe I can just take her, remove her, and see if I can.
That should
um
do it.
yeah, but she's still on, she's still there.
Oh, she doesn't
um
know she's been dropped?
oh, there she went, yay. But
Okay.
anyway, but when she told me this, originally, over the phone when I was going for a walk, I was flabbergasted, because I could feel my, oh, frustration. and I can imagine that she's dealing with people in authority who aren't doing things for the right reasons to protect people, other people who aren't doing things for the right reasons. You know what I mean?
6,000 texts, okay? Like, you would think that that is enough evidence, and you bring that to somebody, and they're gonna be like, "Wow, that's really wrong," and then the evidence continues to build, and then, like, it's gotta be mind-blowing. That's when you realize that you're running into evil, like, because who would not wanna stop that, right?
That's
And
what
who
I
would
ask
not
her.
wanna
Yes.
like, this man is around children, like, if he's capable of doing this to one like, and then he gets paid for a year, and they try to slow walk this, and, like,
Mhm.
don't these people have children and understand that their children could be in that same situation? Like, I just can't even
We
it's so hard to
I know.
fathom that you would
It
even
is.
have the no's and the obstacles, like, it makes sense this person needs to be stopped, there's plenty of evidence. Look
Yes,
into
that's
it.
what
Give us our day in
and
court.
so we have many questions for you, so let's go back to the one that Tricia asked. How was it in terms of other parents in the community? How did they react at that time?
So the other parents in the community, and you can hear me okay?
Yes,
Yes.
Okay.
you're back.
The other parents in the community, they actually were very supportive. I had coached my son's baseball team since the time he was 8 years old. So I knew a lot of people. They knew our character. They knew who we were. So all of his friends' parents were behind us. All of his friends were behind us. That was one of the things that I was concerned about, right? Was like, are his friends going to be supportive? You know, and
Yeah.
honestly, this was probably one of the best kept secrets at the high school. There were teachers there that had no idea that this was even going on. And he had character witnesses that came in that were teachers at the high school that I knew. So there was one teacher in particular, there's a program they had at the high school that they would actually do internships with local businesses. And I was the liaison between the school and the place where I worked for people who wanted to be physical therapists. So I had taken on students for years. And so she knew me, but she was one of the people that was brought on as a character witness. And sitting in the room where we were, there was one of those doors where it had the glass pane on the side. So I saw her walk out, and she was in full blown tears as she was walking out. And my family, who was in the courtroom, they said that once they started questioning the teachers, they had no idea why they were even there. Like they didn't even have the wherewithal to tell them why they were there, because I think they knew that they wouldn't show up then as a character witness, right? So I guess one of the questions they asked them was like, do you text your students to give them updates or anything like that? She said, sure, we text them. Like if we have a meeting change or whatever, we'll text them and say that. And even as a coach, I would text our kids like, hey, weather's bad today. We're having practice indoors, right? But you text them usually in a group. You don't text somebody one-on-one.
Right.
So we would text them and say that we had, change and whatever. And then the next question they said, so do you text them at 2 a.m? And she said, no. And it was at that point, they said that she actually then realized what was going on and why she was there. And so when the trial ended, I went straight to the school, and it was about 2:30 or 3 o'clock on a Friday. And I went to the school and I talked to the principal and I said, listen, you need to go and tell her that I'm not upset with her. Let her know that, they were just doing their job. And I don't blame her for testifying as a quote character witness for him. She had no idea what she was walking into. And I just want you to let her know that. And so he said, I'm glad you came here, because one of the other teachers that they called as a character witness was a guy who had retired. He was living in Florida, came up for this as a character witness. And this teacher was a student of his, was like a student teacher, right? And so then he retires and this guy moves into that position. And it was it was in a shops class. So he was around boys all the time. So it was like metals and shops and that sort of thing. And so he said he stopped in here and wanted me to tell you that had he known what this was for, he would have never flown up here for this. And he said, please tell that mom and her son that I'm extremely sorry that this is going on, that they were caught in this. And so, yeah, I mean, the community, the teachers, everybody could not have been more supportive. And where a lot of people have issues is that the school doesn't support the victim. And that couldn't have been further from the truth in this case. Like I said, we're in a small farming community. You don't ever think this is going to happen here or happen to you.
Yeah.
And they had my back 100%. I mean, I'm not like that parent that is in the school all the time. I'm, you know, and if there's an issue with my kid, I'm actually questioning my kid. I'm not questioning the teacher, right? So I'm
Right.
always the person that will, you know, go after my kid first. I'm like, so what'd you do? Right. And so they knew that that's how I was. And so they knew I wasn't crazy. I wasn't like flying off the handle about stuff. So they were very, very supportive.
Michelle, did any other victims come forward? Were there
Yes.
others?
Yeah. So in what I was doing with my little quote investigation, I was trying to find other kids that could possibly come forward. And the principal had actually said that there were a couple that he was concerned about. And I kind of just started doing a little digging on my own, and they were all from single parent households. The kids looked very similar to my son. And one in particular was about 4 years older than my son. And I had known him in a different capacity. And my son said that he had actually confided in him that something had happened, but he didn't want to come forward. He was afraid it was going to ruin his career. And when we got closer to going to trial, I got a hold of him and went and met with him. And I said, listen, I said, your secret's safe with me for now. I said, but my son is out there by himself testifying. And I said, first, I have to be honest with you. I was really ticked at you that you weren't willing to come forward and save the next kid, because that's how I got my son to come forward, right? We had another talk. This was on another weekend, and he didn't want to come forward. And I said, this is no longer about us, Andrew. This is no longer about you. I said, this is about the 3 boys that live across the street and the 4 that live down the street. I said, something happens to one of them. How do you face their parents knowing you could have done something to stop it? And so I had that conversation with this guy, and I said, your secret's safe with me for now. I said, but if this guy walks, all bets are off. And I said, the only way to see this hurting your career is if you do nothing about it now and people find out that you did nothing. That's how it's going to hurt you. So he picked up the phone and called the detective and gave his statement. He actually testified with my son.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is fantastic. And so remind me again too, and the audience, why did the state's attorney and the people involved with why were they slow walking things? Why were they saying that there is too much time? Why were they saying there was, wasn't enough in the text messages? What would possibly be their motivation for that?
Your flabbergasting and not even be able to come out with a question is the same issue I had at the time, right? I'm like, I'm not getting this. What is the problem here, right? But now, knowing what we all know now, knowing what's in those Epstein files, knowing the people at the highest levels are involved, my question is, were they protecting somebody? Were they involved? That's my question now. I didn't know any of that then. I never really researched trafficking or any of that stuff at the time. So that's where my head goes now, is like, well, who are they protecting?
Well,
right?
my head goes to, who was the video for? Like, is this just a one-off pervert, or is this, is this an operation? We hear about how they actually put those type of people.
Well,
pedophiles they're put in positions where they're going to be able to get access to kids. So that's what you would do if you were going to run an Epstein operation, right?
Well, I can tell you that. So for those of you who have never been involved in anything like this, because I was really at their mercy. I had so much as a traffic ticket, right? I didn't know how all of this worked. And so they have victim liaisons. So these are people that work for the state's attorney's office, and they help the victims kind of walk through all of this and like, hey, this is what's happening next. This is when the next court date is. This is what's coming up. This is what they're doing, why they're doing what they're doing. And I saw her a few years ago, and it was during COVID, and we had masks on, and we looked at each other, and she's like, Michelle? I'm like, Vicky? So, she said, I'm getting ready to retire. And they just asked me last week. Now, she'd been there for 35 years and probably had seen some very horrific stuff. And she said, they asked me what was the case that stood out in her mind the most. And she said that it was our case out of all of the things that she saw. And she said, because of you, she said, if every parent would fight for their kids as hard as you did, we wouldn't have half the problems that we have. And she said, she asked me how Andrew was doing. I said, well, he's struggling a little bit. I said, it's been really tough for him with all of this and in and out of counseling. And she said, I want you to give him a message for me. She said, so there was a soccer coach that lived in the same town where this teacher did. He was coaching youth soccer on a travel team. I think it was 12 or 10U. And he was actually charged with and then subsequently convicted of molesting 2 of the kids that were under the age of 12 and was in prison. She said, but I want you to know something is that the teacher was the one who came to bail him out. So what you were just saying that, you know, there's groups, right? And there had to have been some sort of a ring down there. They were also on the local fire department as volunteers. So they're supposedly, you know, in this position of trust as a coach, and then now you're a fireman and you're a teacher.
Mhm.
So they try to groom everybody. They groom the entire community. Like, there's no way that this guy would do that. I mean, that's what the teacher said. There's like no way
Exactly.
that this would ever happen. There's no way that this guy is doing this. And then for it to actually finally come out in a text message in written form, and for them to actually see it, everybody was floored because you don't expect that. And a lot of times most victims are girls, right? It's very difficult for boys to come forward. My son was completely embarrassed, didn't want any of this to come out, that this teacher was texting him as a boy. But everybody should go to the website 1in6.org. So it's the number 1 in the number 6.org. And that actually is a website where it shows about, for like 1 in every 6 boy will be molested before the age of 18, where it's 1 in every 4 girls. And there's a video there that is so profound. And it's where women are reading letters from victims, and it tells how they got molested. And the interviewer says to the person reading the letter, like, what would you say to this person if you could talk to them today? And the person reading the letter says, you know, I would tell her that she's worth it, that she is worthy, that she is, you know, she's more than what happened to her. And he's, you know, the interviewer then says, you're going to get to meet this person today. And the man walks out. A grown man walks out. And then they're just completely floored that these men are willing to come forward to tell their stories. And that's the thing, is like, we need to support all of these kids, boys, girls, it doesn't matter. It's very difficult for them to come forward. And I think we're seeing a whole shift in this now. Parents are starting to see their kids, right? Parents are standing by their children. And so I think that's really the biggest thing, is that they need to know that their parents will have their backs. A trafficking investigator that I met said that 80% or 70% of the kids whose parents, primarily the mothers, support them and believe them will go on to become productive members of society. So just keep that in mind, and that it's actually really the mom is the biggest component in this, that those kids will then go on to become productive members of society. And just go with your gut feeling too. If you think there's something wrong, there probably is.
Absolutely go with your gut, because and moms, boy, they've tried to keep us from going with their gut because it's always right when we go that way. So I'm so glad you shared that with us. So I want to continue about your journey as well. I got to go back first. So tell me about his conviction, um, how long he was in, and then you also shared where that you ran into him.
Yes. So he did 30 days in jail. He had to pay like a $2,700 fine, register as a sex offender for only 10 years. So as of 2 years ago, he's no longer the sex offender registry, but he can never teach again. In contrast, my son, after the conviction, went back to school in New Jersey in college and completely spiraled out of control, blamed himself for this teacher losing his job, blamed himself for all of this, because when these groomers are good, they make these kids feel for them, right? And so even though my son was extremely smart, like, he still did not have the capacity that adults have to be able to actually wrap their head around that this guy was a predator. So, he was drinking, spiraling out of control. Like the school called me and said, hey, something's going on. And so I filled them in what was going on. The school helped me get him into some counseling out there. My son, from the time he was 7, 8 years old, with the whole 9/11 thing, has always wanted to go into the military and be a Marine. And he felt that if he went to counseling, that he would never be able to go into the Marine Corps. And had to explain to him that, no, it's when you're ordered to go into counseling for whatever reason that they might question you to go into the Marine Corps. So that was his biggest reason. And then he ended up going into the Marine Corps, served for 5.5 years. Once they started pushing the vaccine on them, that's when he got out. But he did intelligence for them, and he's a Russian linguist, and he speaks Spanish fluently. Like when I say he's smart, it's like off the charts smart. It's crazy. So I'm extremely proud of him working through all of this. But I have to tell you, 2 years ago, when I started working on the stuff that I'm working on now and started talking about this again, he was extremely triggered. And he was 29 years old, and he talked to me and he said, Mama, why are you doing this? He's like, you already saved me. So I looked at him. I said, okay, Satan. And he looked at me and I said, what better way would Satan like me to stop saving other children than to use the person I love the most to do it? Oh. And he looked at me and he's like, okay. So we just had this agreement that we don't really talk about it much. If he has questions or wants to know what I'm doing, he'll ask. I know that he's been on my website intermittently because of things that he'll say. So I know that he's kind of paying attention to what's going on in the background, but we don't really talk about it much. So yeah, there's that. And then I did see this teacher working at a mall about 2 years after this conviction. I went in to go get a new lab coat, and he was working at the place where I was going to buy my lab coat. And I started to walk in, and he was working the counter, and I circled away and my heart started racing. I was having like all this PTSD thing going on, right? And I circled around and I started watching him, and he was leaning on the counter looking out into the mall at this children's play area that was only 60 feet away from him. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, how is this even possible? He's on the sex offender registry, right? So I go in, I buy my lab coat. I waited for other people to leave. And the other clerk that was working the counter, I went to him. And then I stepped over in front of the teacher and I said, so do you remember me? He's like, oh, hey, Michelle, how you doing? I said, interesting place where you're working, not even 60 feet from a children's play area. I said, your coworker know about your history? And I walked out. And I went to talk to the police, and they said that he was registered in that county where he was working, because it's a different county from where he lives, and that it was legal for him to be there because that place is privately owned and they're not included in the sex offender registry.
Of course.
So that's why he's able to work there. So I started thinking about it. I said, so places like Chuck E. Cheese, Dave and Buster's,
yes,
libraries, movie theaters, literal playgrounds for these guys. They can go in there if they're on the sex offender registry, no issues, no harm, no foul. They can't go into like a state park or a national park. They can't go within 500 feet of a school, but they can go into these areas where these kids are. So, yeah, so I'll fast forward a little bit. Wow. So
yeah, before you do,
yeah,
you just kind of blew my mind with that. Yeah. I did not realize that.
I think most of our audience won't either. Wow.
Well, see, those laws were written before these places existed, and nobody's gone back to amend them.
Oh, wow. So yes, keep going, because your work has.
Yeah.
Oh, first of all, congratulations to your son. That is amazing, miraculous, and incredible. And a wonderful testimony to both of you. And having and obviously having God stronger in your life as you went to the church the first. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. Obviously has been leading this. And now as you're realizing all of these things and understanding these facts and understanding how messed up this whole thing is, tell me how you continued on your journey with this.
So I, like many people who woke up in 2020 and 2019, I was early 2019, started waking up to some of the evils that are going on in this world, right? And started following different things. I'm like, everything is upside down. Like, this isn't the world that we actually, like, what we think that we're living in is not where we're living. Started going to the Reawaken events with Clay Clark and General Flynn, and went to one in Nashville in January of 2023. And I went to a VIP dinner with one of my friends who was actually singing at the Reawakens, Tanya Joy Gibson. And we're at this dinner, and I get introduced to a trafficking investigator named Amy Coelho, and she's also a paralegal. And she starts telling me about some cases she's working on. So she was working on the La Luz del Mundo case, which just ended after a 10-year battle that she was in with this church cult, La Luz del Mundo Church. So they're in 74 different countries. So the women in the church prepare the kids in the church for the men in the church. So she was telling me about this. It had just concluded in November of 2022. And if people want to go look into this, there's a documentary on Netflix about it. If you just put in La Luz del Mundo, it'll come up. And then she told me about busting like 23 different sex trafficking cells between Mexico and California. Told me about one of our other clients was a Larry Nassar gymnast. And I'm like, well, I'm going to tell her about my measly little case here from Illinois, right? So I start to tell her about my case. And she gets tears in her eyes and grabs my arm. And she said, I need to get a picture with you and send this to my team. I said, what are you talking about? And she said, we use your case for every trafficking case we bust, including the ones I just told you about, because you have the only grooming conviction in the United States in 10 years. And we have to prove the grooming in order to prove the trafficking. And she goes, and to hear your story from start to finish and how much you went through, she goes, you and your son have saved thousands of lives.
Oh my gosh.
I was a mess. Like, we were both crying. And I couldn't believe it, what I was hearing. And I said, so if that's the case, if you're using this for your cases, she goes, no, you don't understand. Everybody in the United States is using your case because there is no other case. And I said, so could they have used this with the Ghislaine Maxwell Jeffrey Epstein trials? And she said, I'd have to look at the case file. She goes, but there's nothing else they could have used. They would have had to have used your case. So to think that we could have even had a hand in one of the most prolific pedophiles of our time is very surreal for me. And it's very unbelievable. And so she said, what we need to do is get a law put in place where no one could take a plea deal. She thought that we had the only grooming conviction because people were taking plea bargains and getting out. And so I had become friends with General Flynn. He'd been to my church a couple of times. And so I went to him at the Reawaken. Now he's very busy at these Reawakens, right? So I went to him and told him very high level what was going on. He said, I need to introduce you to my sister, Mary Flynn O'Neill, who was at this Reawaken, the only one she's been to, right? And the only time she's ever been, or the first time she had been. And again, by the hand of God and the grace of God. So I get introduced to Mary. I sit down and tell her my story. And she said, listen, I need your conviction because we actually have a family here, a kid here in Nashville that we need to help. And I need your conviction. So I said, okay. And she said, I'm going to get you introduced to a paralegal named Allie Hopper out of Florida. So Allie has now gone on to, you've probably seen her in congressional hearings. She has actually testified in congressional hearings about the trafficking going on at the border. So Allie and I started working together. She started looking through the criminal code in Florida, soon realized very quickly that Florida didn't have a grooming law. So we had to take a step back because there was no law to amend. So we take a step back, and then we found out that Illinois was the only state that had a grooming law in place. So I had gone down and spoken at a GOP event where she was, and she was presenting as well. One of the senators that she had been working on to sponsor this bill pulls me off to the side. He wants to hear my entire story. So I tell him he had been a former pastor. And so he ended up sponsoring the bill in Florida. So they got the bill in Florida and got that passed. It was signed into law in April of 2024, sorry. And concurrently, we were working with another representative, Mark Thompson out of Iowa, was introduced to him through Michelle Peterson, who was a mama bear in Iowa that got the masks taken off the kids in Iowa during COVID. And he was the one to help with that. So we were working with Mark, Allie and I were working with him, got in a couple of Zoom calls with him, gave him the information of the law in Florida and Illinois. And then soon thereafter, Iowa had a law put in place. I think it was in May of 24. Then Arizona reached out to Illinois or to Iowa and Florida because they had a softball coach that was grooming a player. And so they then put a law in place. And then there was a woman named Susan Cobb in Georgia who'd been trying to get a grooming law put in place for 3 years after her daughter was groomed and subsequently abused by a YMCA gymnastics coach. And her daughter, unfortunately, committed suicide when she came forward and people weren't believing her when she was 21. She had started being groomed and abused when she was, I think, 10 or 11 by this guy. And after these two laws, actually the three laws went through in 2024, then Georgia's law finally went through once these other laws started falling. So then the following year, there were some guys in Louisiana that came forward about the priests that were molesting them. These other laws passed the year before. They got the law passed then in Louisiana. And I have a cousin in Montana, and she reached out to a representative after her daughter had been groomed through Snapchat. And I kind of walked her through this. I said, you need to take your phone to the local police department. And she had bought a Bark phone after hearing me on a podcast. So if you go on my website too, at the very bottom, there's a Bark app on there. It's an affiliate link that I have with all full transparency, but I talk about Bark all the time. If I would have had this, I would have seen some of these messages coming through. So Bark is an app, or you can buy the actual phone, and you can get the messages going in and out of your kid's phone onto your phone, every single message if you want, or you can set up for certain keywords, body parts, cuss words, those sorts of things that can come into your phone. You can lock down their phone from your phone so they can only have their phone usage between certain hours. You can lock it so they can only call certain people, parents, grandparents, siblings. You have all full control of what apps they're putting on their phone. So this person was messaging her daughter through Snapchat. Her daughter was 13. So she then took the phone to the local police department, and they told her she just needed to be a better parent. I said, take it to your local sheriff. They told her essentially the same thing. I said, take it to your local FBI. So she did. And again, by the grace of God, this guy had been trained by ICAC, which is Internet Crimes Against Children. He took the phone and wiped it and found that they were actually grooming her through Snapchat from Iowa. She lived in Montana. So I said, you need to get a representative or a senator that will sponsor a grooming bill in Montana. So her boyfriend's cousin is a Democrat rep. She said, you know what, I'm not on the right committee for this, but I am fully behind this. I will fully support this. She hands it across the aisle, and this is what we should be doing in the United States of America.
Yes, yes.
She hands it across the aisle to a representative whose last name is Love, by the way. She sponsors the bill, and they get a unanimous consent for the grooming bill in the House and the Senate. And they have the best law in the country. It should be model legislation for the entire country. So anybody who is 18 years of age or older grooming a child 13 years of age or younger, and they're convicted, it's 100 years in prison, no chance of parole for the first 25. If they get out at 25 years, it's a lifelong satellite surveillance. And if it's a child who is 16 years of age or younger being groomed by somebody 18 years of age or older, it'll be 4 to 100 years, depending on what's been texted and what they find. But again, no chance of parole, lifelong satellite surveillance if they get out. So they use the age 16 to define a child because I think that is their legal age of consent, right? But in most of these states, in every other law, they define a child as anybody under the age of 18. So that's the other thing that needs to happen is in all of these cases, in these grooming laws, they need to define a child as anybody under the age of 18. It shouldn't go by the age of consent, because nobody at 16 is going to consent to having sex with a 50-year-old, right? No. So we then put in like Romeo and Juliet clauses. So like if you have someone, let's say who's 17 dating a 16-year-old, that 17-year-old turns 18 next week, mom doesn't like that 18-year-old, then they're going to go after that 18-year-old, maybe for statutory rape or for grooming or whatever. But, you know, we have to let law enforcement do their jobs. They're going to look at that and be like, nope, they had an established relationship. This is not viable, right? This isn't going to be a thing.
Right.
So, so that's what we're doing now. So Montana now has a law. And then this year, Wisconsin put through a fabulous law, and Indiana put through a law, which is somewhat terrible. I'd been working with a senator for 2 years, and they defined a child as anybody under the age of 14. So the National Centers for Missing and Exploited Children say that the children between the ages of 15 and 18 are the ones who are the most vulnerable. Actually, between the ages of 14 and 18 are the most vulnerable. And so it just makes you wonder, like, why aren't they protecting those kids? And again, you look at files, if some of these people are involved, they're not going to want to protect that age group because then they're making laws that will actually put them in prison. Right?
Yes.
So, yeah.
When things don't make sense. It's for a reason. When something is so obvious as to why,
Yeah,
you can't give a good answer as to why you wouldn't want to put this through and
right,
protect all children 18 and under.
right.
There's no sense to that.
No, there isn't. And so I've also been working with Tennessee. So there's Representative Jody Barrett and then Senator Janice Bowling. So Janice met with myself and Hope Beryl Green, who is a trafficking survivor and was sold to Epstein at 5 years old. She met with us last fall for 90 minutes, asked all kinds of questions, asked what should be in this bill. They put everything in this bill that we asked for. But then when I read it a couple weeks ago, I said, oh, they only have a 10-year on the sex offender registration. We want to make it lifelong, right? So anybody who's grooming a child and convicted should be a lifelong sex offender registry. And so I called them, or I emailed them. I said, hey, can we amend this before it goes through to committee to make it a lifelong registration? She goes, I'll put it in tomorrow. And she did, and it stuck. So it went through committee in the Senate and the House, passed the first round of committees, and with the amendments, everything passed. So now it goes to like a second round of committees next week, and then it will go to the House floor and the Senate, and then hopefully be signed into law here soon. So the thing is once this goes forward and gets out of committee and people have to vote on this, most people are not going to vote no publicly, right?
Yeah.
So that's the problem here in Illinois. We have 2 bills sitting in Illinois that are the amendments for the Illinois law. And in the House, it's, I think House number, the bill is HB 1140 and Senate Bill 284. It's also on my website under Andrew's Law, under that tab. And Representative Jed Davis and Senator Sue Resin, who are my rep and senator here, they are sponsoring this bill. It's been sitting in committee for 2 years. And I have it on good authority that they were told to stand down and never call it for vote. It would be known as Andrew's Law, but it would amend the current sex offender, or the current grooming law to make the sex offender registry include places of businesses that are privately owned, such as what we talked about, Chuck E. Cheese, Dave & Buster's, all play areas, right? And then also expand the sex offender registry from 10 years to lifelong. And right now, as it's written, would be no plea bargains. A lot of people have a problem with the no plea bargain. They state that that's unconstitutional. So nowhere in the Constitution does it state that you're allowed to take a plea deal. And I know that Representative Mace at the federal level is putting in no plea bargains in a bill for people who are charged with grooming, or charged with trafficking. So I do think that this will become a thing that we can get back to what we know as common law, right, and natural law, not all this case law that we have going on now. We need to get back to actual constitutional law, which is based on, the founding principles of God's law. So anyway, that's what it is right now. So we're trying really hard to push that to come out of committee here in Illinois to hopefully become law and to amend the current grooming law. But that's been a fight here. I actually went to my county board currently and asked them if they would sign a resolution to back Andrew's Law. And unfortunately, our state's attorney, who is a different state's attorney than what it was at the time of our case, he is also of the belief that is unconstitutional to take away a plea bargain. So they backed it so long as we would amend it to not include the plea bargain, the no plea bargain. So, I mean, I'm actually okay with minimal sentencing too, right? So if you are convicted of grooming a child, you have a minimum sentence of 5 years, no chance of parole for those 5 years, whatever the case might be. I would love to see it be 100 years, just like Montana. But I don't know that we'll see that here in Illinois. Unfortunately, our governor is J.B. Pritzker, and he was actually named by President Clinton that he was on the Lolita Express with him. So when you have people at the highest levels that are probably the ones to stand down and not call this for a vote, there's where the problem lies. And then his cousin Tom Pritzker, who's a CEO of Hyatt Hotels, he is all over the Epstein files, and he's in his book under 13 different phone numbers on page 45. And his son, Tom, is also on page 44 under 13 different phone numbers. So when you have families that are actually involved, you're going to have a hard time getting this to go through. And so what I'm trying to do is just expose this a little bit more. He's trying to distance himself from Tom Pritzker. So how about you want to protect kids and you want to distance yourself from this guy? Then how about you support the grooming bill here in Illinois, right?
Exactly.
So that's right now. So
well, Your fight is amazing, Michelle, and I the show that you watched, the interview that I did that you referenced was with the guy on the couch, Jeff is the one that I just put out because you would said he's quite the warrior too and won't take no for an answer. What I'm finding, Michelle, is interviewing the people who are standing up today have that same capacity. And what is interesting, and they all have taken different paths. Your path has been to save your son and then save this country with these tougher laws, and your strength and tenacity is being used for that. And it was also, I have to just reflect, when we were talking about God and God leading this, the sun behind Tricia was breaking these huge sunbeams behind
I
you.
noticed that too.
You just can't make this stuff up. I
I know.
know. And I thank God for the warriors in this planet. I mean, thank God, because if if the people who if we weren't here and we didn't fight, everyone would be in
Right.
concentration camps at this point. Um, s-
I wonder
yes, Michelle.
too, like Michelle, I know you had mentioned that your son went into the Marines and for 5.5 years until they pushed the vaccine. If he didn't go if he didn't go through what he went through and see you advocate for him and just, I mean, like stand up, like, for every obstacle, being told by authority no, or being pushed off by authority, and you didn't take no for an answer, you just kept on going. Did I it Part of me just wonders if that hadn't happened, would he not have stood up for himself and taken the vaccine? Would he have succumbed to the authority and never questioned authority if he didn't see his mother do that?
I mean, possibly, but I mean, even aside from this, I mean, I always taught him not to be the victim, right? But to be the leader and be the person that stands up for the next person and to always look out for the next person. So him being a Marine was fitting for him. He's not a very large person, so he's not what you would typically think as a Marine. And the Marines though need some of those smart guys too behind the scenes, right? So to do the intel stuff and those sorts of things. What's funny is they sent a major in to talk to him, and he was a lance corporal at the time, and they sent a major in to talk to him to convince him to take the vaccine. And I'd been sending him all sorts of stuff about what was in these vaccines and not to take it. And he actually talked that major out of taking the vaccine.
There you go.
Yeah.
Oh my
So
gosh.
it
That
was
is
really unbelievable.
You're an awesome mom.
yeah,
Well, he's an
yeah,
awesome kid, and we have an awesome God that we serve, So,
yeah,
I mean, the Bible tells you 365 times, right, to have no fear. And
right.
that's kind of what I've stood on these last few years. I mean, you just can't have any fear, and you have to stand for what's right. And I am now have a better relationship with God. I'm at a fantastic church, and our pastor speaks truth, and he talks about all of this stuff from the pulpit. He talks about the World Economic Forum. He talks about Agenda 2030. He talks about all of this stuff. And so people in
Wow.
the church are waking up to what's actually happening, and that this is an agenda. And he brings it back to the Bible and the Constitution. I have never understood the Bible so well as I do now. I mean, I still don't know it that great, let's be honest, but I know it better now because he's taken real world things and putting them back into the Bible, and it comes to life for me. I'm like, oh, so that's what that means, right?
Yeah.
And the whole thing, like you can see behind me, the Millstone Church. So that's my nonprofit, and it's Luke 17 that if anyone should hurt one of these little ones and cause one of these little ones to stumble, it's better for them to have a millstone tied around their neck than to have
Yes.
cast into the sea. So like that's kind of what I stand on, and that I will do whatever I have to do to stop these predators from hurting our children and call it out wherever I can. I mean, I was that parent that was also, I didn't have any kids in school at the time during COVID. So I was going because I was safe. I could go and talk about COVID and getting these masks off these kids at these school board meetings and telling them, that this isn't the right thing to do. And so Now I'm going in, and actually at the high school where my son went and at the grade school where my son went, they let 2 teachers go over the last year. And I let them know that the stuff that they let these teachers go for is potentially grooming. And they had no idea, like they don't know what it looks like. So
Yeah.
that's part of what I'm doing is I just need to educate people about what it looks like. You know,
Right.
your kids are going to become withdrawn. They might not want to do the normal things that they're doing. My son had a resting heart rate of 120, which was clearly anxiety. And I just brushed it off. I thought that, he had a heart issue. I took him to a cardiologist, everything cleared. I had a hard time getting him up to go to school. He wasn't sleeping well. If I would have known these things ahead of time, I could have maybe got on this quicker. And then the other thing too, where I made a huge mistake is I didn't take my son's phone away from him at night. These kids don't need their phones after 9 o'clock. Take their phones. And if they say they need their alarm clock, buy them an alarm clock, right? So if I would have had his phone, I would have seen these messages coming in. Those are the things that I kind of kick myself about. Like I could have done things differently. I thought I was doing enough by checking his phone, and it clearly wasn't enough.
Yeah, well, now you're here to share everything that you've learned, and you have a microphone, and that's fantastic. And I hope and I know you'll continue to reach many people. I noticed I'm going to put your account below for a minute because I noticed that General Flynn sent you a direct message just like a couple weeks ago here, and it was
My ex
wonderful
account is actually at Michelle Pete 77.
Wonderful message. He sees what you're doing and which is fantastic, and it's incredible what you are doing, and your tenacity and your strength, even when you're getting kicked under the table, is paying off for all of us, Michelle. So I can't thank you enough. Any last things you want to leave us with? What a wonderful discussion. I appreciate you so much.
Yeah. Just again, if you think there's something wrong, then go with your gut feeling and just know that there probably is something wrong, and dig in and try to find out what you can, and what's going on with your kids. And don't just brush it off, and thank God for my husband, and he's taking care of the house when I'm off doing all of these different things and trying to help save our little corner of the world. That's been a little bit rough too, all of this is done on your personal finances a lot of times. And so if anybody out there is willing to actually help support, that would be fantastic. There's a donate page on my website.
If people are just listening, it's Michelle Peterson, and the Peterson is spelled PETERSON.org.
And we set the website up too so that people can actually go on there and pull the laws off. So when you click on the laws that are current under the current law tab, it'll take you right to the Legiscan. So you can print it from there, take it to your local rep. If anybody has a local rep or a senator that's willing to sponsor this bill that they know personally, you can contact me through the contact page on my website too. It goes straight to an email to me. I will reach out to you and we will work on that together, and I will get a hold of that rep or senator, let them know what this is about, and we will help them all along the way and help them write a bill draft if we need to. Also, there's a federal bill draft on there on the website. So under the Andrews Law tab, there's a federal bill draft, and that actually is, I took the Montana law as the ground for that, and Representative Aaron Houchin out of Indiana is sponsoring that right now at the federal level, and right now it's in legal. So I'm hoping that we can get that to go through at the federal level, because there is a federal grooming law, but it's an adjunct charge. So you have to be charged with something else to then be charged with grooming. And right now we're trying to get, so there's a standalone grooming charge that you can have at the federal level. And that's if you cross state lines. So let's take the case with my cousin, the people in Iowa were grooming her in Montana. That's crossing state lines. That would actually go into a federal grooming charge. So that's why that's important. And also wherever the federal level goes, the states will go. So it might actually help the states go a little bit.
Well, thank you, Michelle, because I was going to ask what we could, what people could do out there to help. And so this sounds like you've got great resources on your website, so people don't have to start from scratch and learn the hard way. They can kind of build on what you've already figured out. They're not staring at a blank piece of paper, especially when they find out something like this happens.
Right.
You're your mind, I'm sure, is all over the place, and you've got a lot of emotions. So this sounds like this is like there is something that you can do. You are not powerless.
Yes,
That's right.
right. And if you go to the
Oh.
education tab, there's education there too that people can just print off. I tried to make it as easy as I could so they can just like what parents need to know and what grooming looks like. So, you know, if you have somebody who is just trying to isolate one of your kids and keep things a secret, they tell the kids, hey, this is a secret, just keep it between us, don't tell your parents. Those are things that you need to educate your kids on, that nobody should be keeping secrets from you at all as a parent. So that's probably the biggest thing.
Is there anything else like like in the very beginning of how they are targeting these kids? And I heard you say something earlier, which, you know, one is you were a single or mom at the time. So I'm sure they're looking for somebody that doesn't quite have the solid family structure, somebody that's very, very busy. So if you don't have two parents there and you don't, you know, maybe they're watching to see, you know, are they at every game, or I don't know, like they're obviously have an MO as to
Right.
what the right potential victim can be the most successful in their eyes.
Right. So I wasn't a single parent at the time, but I think he thought I was still. But again, I was working, I was coaching, you know, and doing all of those extra things. So I think he thought I was too busy to know what was going on in my son's life. But the other two victims that we actually were able to make contact with, single parent households. So they will target single parent households for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just really quickly, I told this to Michelle when we were on the phone. I was a music director at a Christian youth theater, and one of the teachers there also was molesting and grooming and molesting several of the theater boys, and it was ones that were vulnerable. He was convicted, but for a very short period of time, and was quickly out. And so, you know, they do know how to target the right individuals that seem either kind, like your son, or vulnerable. And I appreciate you so much giving tools for people to recognize those signs. I mean, just the fact that you said he had the heart problem and you thought it was a heart problem and not stress. How the heck would you know
Right.
that? You know, there's just so many signs to look for. So when we have shows like this, Michelle, that's when I said, I'll tell Tricia, I want everyone to hear this because this is so important. I want the world to watch this because what you're doing, it's so important. And I hope those of you that are watching will share this and get this out, because what you're doing is phenomenal. It's incredibly important. And I think before, though, too, Michelle, I think people didn't realize it was such a bad, so prominent. It's so happening so much, but I think people get that now.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. And all of it starts with grooming, even the kids that are coming over across the border, right? So somebody's grooming those families in home country. Hey, I'll take your kid across the border. So they're paying them to take their kids across the border, where they're trafficking them the entire way. And then once they get here. So all of this starts with grooming. So I would love to see an international grooming law too be put in place eventually. So, and it's so funny because General Flynn, you know, he had a conversation with me. He said, Michelle, only takes one person, and you're that person. Right. And so I'm like, okay, so now I have God and General Flynn telling me, right. So like, yeah.
Well, Michelle, you're definitely, I heard, you know, you're networking with the right people and you're finding a lot of support with the right people. And I heard you mention Hope. I literally just heard her podcast with Mark Messina, I think day before yesterday. Very powerful. Wow. And boy, if you haven't heard that out there, you need to go to Parallel 8 and listen to that. I think it was, he did it last Tuesday live.
Yeah.
Very, very powerful. But when you hear what she went through, like, boy, I will never, ever, ever complain about my life.
I did an anti-trafficking event in my church in the fall, and I had Hope, Kathy O'Brien, myself, Lynn's Piper Loomis, Amy Coelho, the trafficking investigator. They all came out and spoke. It was so powerful. It was so good.
Wow.
And you can actually find it on Rumble. So on rumble.com, we got kicked off of YouTube at my church because my pastor speaks so much truth. So we had to get a Rumble channel.
Congratulations.
So yeah. Fox
You
River
got it.
Lutheran Church. So if people go into Fox River Lutheran Church on Rumble, they can go back to last fall.
Say it
and
one
they
more
can
time.
see it.
One more time. Say it one more time.
Fox River Lutheran Church on Rumble,
Okay. Okay.
and you can find it on there. And it was live streamed that day, so
Wow.
it's
That's
there.
huge.
It is huge. And my pastor opened it up, and his opening, what we would say is a little mini sermon, like call it like a monologue, right, is really powerful. And he asks why more churches weren't speaking about this. So
That's a great
it's
question.
it's really so good. Yeah.
Yeah. And I bet at that event, you were probably like feeling like I feel right now, like everyone needs to see this, this
Right.
live stream, you know? Well, we're gonna one person at a time, as General Flynn said, we're gonna make sure that more and more and more people see all of this. And it just goes to show that it is one person at a time, one very, very strong person with God leading the way.
So,
And you're doing it, Michelle. So God bless you,
yeah.
and thank you for your being this tireless work that you're doing. But you have an army that is gathering behind you.
Thank you. And I can't say enough for the podcasters and the citizen journalists that have come out over the last 6 years and that give us a voice, give somebody like me a voice to be able to get this information out, because otherwise, how else would this have ever happened? And for people to actually hear this, I was on And We Know, and then I was on Mark Messina's podcast too on Parallel 8. Like, I think I was on his actual 40,000 foot view on Sunday night, and that garnered a ton of views and people reaching out.
Yeah.
So that's what it takes, is just people sharing this
Yeah.
and really getting a representative to sponsor this in any state. And because of the work that we're doing, other states are globbing on, like they have some sort of a grooming law in place that I might not have had anything to do with, but all of these states really need to be a little bit stronger. It needs to be a first offense felony. It can't be a misdemeanor like Indiana did. It needs to be a felony charge. And people need to go back and actually research Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals and Alfred Kinsey and what he did at Indiana University. And all of this has been a plan in place to go after the next generation, to destroy this country. And that's what people need to understand, is that this is a bigger plan in place. It's not about my son at this little small school here in Illinois, right? It's about the country as a whole. They're coming after our kids in every way that they can. And it's about taking this country over. That's what they want to do. And they want to destroy the United States of America. And this is God's country. And we're not going to let it be destroyed. And we all need to stand up locally. Local action, like General Flynn says, leads to national impact. So that's what we need to do.
Even if it's one podcast at a time, Ellen.
Right.
Podcast at a time.
Yes.
Thank you
for giving me a
so
voice.
much. Oh my gosh. And I hope thank you. And I hope everybody watching this on X and on Rumble will just share this with one person. And we're you got an army building behind you, Michelle. I'm telling you. Thank you so much for being with us. God bless you and all that you're doing.
Thank you, Michelle. And thank you, Andrew.
Yes, as well.
Yes, and Andrew. Take care. All right.
Bye-bye.